The title of this talk will be Perspectives on Child Abuse. Starting now. I'm now going to speak on a very unpleasant subject. What I'm going to say will definitely not be accepted or acceptable to some. I might lose some friends and disciples who strongly disagree with me. I have been asked to clarify why I support child abusers. This is not the first time that I've been called upon to do this, but I've not done so because my experience in trying to address such questions is that those who disagree, to put it mildly, tend to take things out of context and presume that any perspective other than their own means that I am a supporter of the evil of child abuse. The implication is that I support child abuse, I support child abusers, therefore I support child abuse. So I didn't take this up previously. I didn't respond to this because of the nastiness of those who just presume that I must be evil because I don't take the same position that they do. So I have to say, I do not support child abusers. And you say, yes, you do. But I want to draw a distinction between child abusers and ex-child abusers. It seems to be presumed that anyone who has abused children must be innately evil and cannot possibly be a devotee of any kind. Surely a devotee cannot do such horrible things. However, that's not what Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita, although citing the Apichet Sudarachara verse in this context invokes horror in some, as if it doesn't apply. There are some situations where some have decided that Krishna's words in this regard, they're not applicable. They say that anyone who is chanting Hare Krishna but who's done child abuse cannot be sincere in any way whatsoever. They're wolves in sheep's clothing. A little aside here. We live in a bad world. The whole society around us is abusive of children if we see how many children grow up taking drugs from a young age, having sex at a young age, are suicidal and criminal. There are rampant kinds of child abuse which are just considered normal in so-called civilized society. No one makes a fuss. Contraception, abortion, divorce, especially in the presence of young children, fighting between parents in the presence of young children. It may be that those who are so much against, we should be against child abuse, but those who are so much vocal about it don't see that there are much broader parameters of child abuse. So yeah, be vocal about it, try to stop it, but try to keep a somewhat balanced perspective on it also. Getting back to child abuse in ISKCON, there's a strange psychology, dichotomy, the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde syndrome. If you don't know what that is, look it up. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The one person who was basically good, but had a very bad side to him and eventually became very bad. So it may be that the devotee has some demoniac tendencies. They take to Krishna consciousness seriously, and after doing so, they succumb to some really very, very bad anarthas, yet they're still trying to be devotees. There but for the grace of God go I. That's a saying. I can't say I'm categorically better than a child abuser. How many sins have I done? Maybe not in this life. Cow killing, murder, rape, contraception, abortion, genocide. I'm in this material world because I'm sinful. Srila Prabhupada kindly picked me up, or tried to pick me up. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur sings, Heno dushto karma nai jaha ami kari nai sahasra sahasra bara hari. What kind of horrible things have I not done thousands and thousands of times? The response to child abuse that seems to be mainstream in devotee society at present is that offenders should be shamed as far as possible and driven out of Vaishnava society, and no one should have any sympathy for them whatsoever. Any sign, any trace of any sympathy for a devotee who has succumbed to some terrible tendency proves that the person who has sympathy is as bad, as evil as the wrongdoer. What would Srila Prabhupada say? It seems to me unlikely that he would totally reject and abandon a misbehaved devotee after who knows how many births we take to Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada, he did reject some disciples, but not for misbehavior, even bad misbehavior. And especially, there's at least one case we know of a devotee who had performed very valuable service, had the potential to do much more. It came to light that alongside doing his valuable service, he was having multiple fall downs. He was a sannyasi GBC member. I'll say the name because it is mentioned anyway in Harishari Prabhu's Transcendental Diary. The name is Madhudvisha. He was a GBC member and a sannyasi. Srila Prabhupada liked him very much. He had done tremendous service in picking up the Australian ISKCON. So anyway, I'm going to read from Harishari Prabhu's Transcendental Diary. Pushta Krishna Maharaj spent a long time on the phone in the evening informing all the temples in Madhudvisha zone on the east coast that he, Madhudvisha, has fallen and is no longer the GBC. However, when he came to report his actions to Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada was angry. Prabhupada was made aware of the initial suspicions in Australia, but his idea had been to keep the affair quiet until he reached New York, because Srila Prabhupada had reassigned Madhudvisha, taken him out of the Australia zone. He'd heard about his multiple fall downs, and reassigned him to a GBC zone in New York. He didn't remove him from GBC service. So Prabhupada wanted to keep the affair quiet until he reached New York, where he could see Madhudvisha personally and attempt to clear everything up without a scandal. He wanted to save him, and he was upset that news of Madhudvisha's fall down was now widespread. He rebuked Pushta Krishna. Now you have made it impossible for him to return. And Srila Prabhupada wanted Madhudvisha to return. Later on in the Transcendental Diary, we find Harishari Prabhu recalling that Pushta Krishna Swami himself fell down. Harishari Prabhu writes, Pushta Krishna's fall was not unexpected. Srila Prabhupada pinpointed the cause. He said it was because he had made Madhudvisha's difficulties a public issue. Prabhupada had wanted to keep it quiet and deal with Madhudvisha on his own, for despite his entanglement in illicit activity, Madhudvisha was still doing service. Prabhupada said that he had wanted to rectify him and keep him in devotional service. But without consultation, Pushta Krishna had advertised the situation, and this was counter to his desire, to Srila Prabhupada's desire. So Srila Prabhupada was looking to rectify him. Nowadays, with the internet, it's impossible to hide anything. Is that good or is it bad? Well, whether it's good or whether it's bad, it's just a fact of life in the present age. But we can see that Srila Prabhupada's approach is. Now, falling down with women, it's serious misbehavior for anyone, for a sannyasi especially. Child abuse is in a different category, we can say, but it's falling down with a woman, you can say, well, that's abuse of the woman, or anyway, child abuse is particularly horrible. One point is that falling down with women is so common within ISKCON, and illicit sex is so much accepted in mainstream society that we tend to treat it quite lightly. Certainly those men who fall down with women, they don't get roasted in the same way that child abusers do. For a Brahmin to fall down, for someone who's supposed to be a Brahmin who engages in illicit sex, meat eating, taking of intoxication, gambling, in traditional Vedic culture, these are all considered very sinful. Nowadays, we don't consider them so, but mainstream society still considers child abuse to be very, very bad. That might change. You never know. I'm not saying it's good if it changes, but it's better if it changes that mainstream society recognizes that any form of illicit sex is sinful, is bad. And there are gradations also. Child abuse is definitely very, very bad, but still we can consider Srila Prabhupada's outlook that he doesn't want to completely reject a devotee who wants to be a devotee, who's done very valuable service. He wants somehow to accommodate them. This can become a very tricky question. By accommodating fallen sannyasis, do we not undermine the whole institution of sannyas and cheapen it? By giving some room for ex-child abusers to continue in Krishna consciousness, do we not lessen the crime of child abuse and normalize it? It's a dilemma. At least it's not for everyone a dilemma. For many, it's no dilemma. Just drive them out, throw them out. But I'm just wondering if that is the fully correct attitude. And by being so rejecting of devotees who are trying to be devotees, we may commit offenses to them also. This will be hated by those who hate what I'm saying, but there are cases we see in the pastimes of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta of them saying that people had become ghosts for their offenses in criticizing devotees. And again, they will say, well, you can't be a devotee if you do such horrible things. But again, that's not the verdict of Bhagavad Gita. So yeah, it is a dilemma. On the one hand, we want to drive out child abuse altogether from Vaishnava society. I wonder if it's even possible when it's so rampant in Kami society, despite all endeavors to stop it, curb it, it goes on rampantly. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't make endeavors to keep it out, but it's probably going to be with us. The whole society is very bad. ISKCON is not an island. We're in the middle of this horrible Kali Yuga. So we want to drive out child abuse altogether. So it might seem that by completely rejecting in all respects anyone who has any record of child abuse, then we can drive it out completely, finished. But is it really proper to drive out devotees who have made and who have the potential to continue making valuable contributions? There are devotees who have done child abuse and have come out of that and have gone on for decades inspiring devotees, helping them. Are they really all wolves in sheep's clothing? Or are they trying to be Krishna conscious? As we're all trying, we're all struggling. It could be said, well, devotees, they can continue practicing Krishna consciousness, but not in ISKCON. They can do it at home, or they can go off to the Gauriya Math or Sri Sampradaya or whatever, whoever will accept them. But then again, we have devotees who did things wrong a long time ago, but have not engaged in child abuse literally for decades. Maybe some allowance could be made for them, considering that association with devotees is essential in Krishna consciousness. Krishna bhakti janma mool hoy sadhu sangha. Krishna prem janme teho puna mukhya anga. The very root of Krishna bhakti, the root of its arising, is association with devotees. And even when one comes to the level where Krishna prem is awakening in one's heart, still it is a major limb of devotional service. That is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says. So, could ex-child abusers who are prepared to at least clean toilets in ISKCON temples, or if they go into any ISKCON temple, everyone will know, yes, they did this, they did that. If they regularly go to some temple, give them some service, give them some association, allow them to join in kirtan. We also have to consider the recognized phenomenon in secular society of people making accusations of rape and child abuse, even against their parents, which later turn out to be false. It's a syndrome. It's not just one or two cases. There are enough cases that it's a very worrying syndrome. In the meantime, after the accused parties have been imprisoned, their reputations destroyed, their lives destroyed, and we see, at least in some cases of child abuse that have been adjudicated within ISKCON, that the accused parties will admit that they've done some wrong, but they state that there are exaggerations and misrepresentations also. But typically, those who are accused are so much scorned that they're not considered worthy even of a proper hearing. In other words, whatever the accusations are taken as a fact, and the persons who are accused aren't even, they shouldn't even be listened to. There can't be anything that they could possibly say to represent or to give a different perspective. Often trial is by public contempt on the internet. So child abuse is terrible, horrible, dangerous, but it's also dangerous that within ISKCON there are no proper judicial procedures followed, not only in cases of child abuse. What are called judicial procedures in cases of child abuse often seem to be driven by vindictiveness, with the guilty verdict already settled before inquiry, and then deliberately dig up all kinds of dirt, wrong things that the person may have done or they're accused of doing, which have got nothing to do with child abuse. And the investigators try to get people to say bad things. They're looking for material to incriminate, sometimes not involving the accused whatsoever, and not to speak of the accused, even someone who has anything good to say about them is considered a pervert. If it is attempted to explain that there are many devotees who have taken guidance from and been benefited by and who have no complaint against the accused, or if it is attempted to state that some of the accusations are possibly not completely accurate or exaggerated, one is immediately labeled a facilitator of child abuse. So it's natural that devotees become, or anyone, becomes livid and wants to scream and maybe perform physical violence against child abusers. But if we are to operate as a functional society, there have to be proper judicial procedures. Otherwise, it's very dangerous. Anyone can say anything, and it's just taken as being true. Anyway, I don't want to discuss this further. I'm giving this little talk here. It's going out in public. It will be cut into pieces, no doubt. But I don't want to discuss this further with those who are so livid against any kind of child abuse that they seem to have lost their discrimination and just presume that everyone must be very bad if they have anything to do with or any sympathy for anyone who ever performed child abuse. That's my experience. It's a certain kind of persons it's impossible to discuss with in a reasonable manner. So in such an atmosphere, I won't attempt to discuss further. You can send me all kinds of nasty emails. That's it. I may lose friends or disciples, but that is my position. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhu